The great Mauryan emperor Ashoka occupied a unique place in the history of India. His policies of universal peace, non-violence and religious harmony find no parallel in the monarchs of the world. Ashoka stands out as a monarch who combined successful kingship with idealism and philosophy. Like other rulers, Ashoka too began his reign with war. The conquest of Kalinga, however, the mindless destruction of life and property in this war shattered him so greatly that he vowed never to wage any war again. Instead, he adopted the policy of Dhamma Vijaya, that is, conquest through Dhamm. In his 13th major rock edict, Ashoka has said the true conquest is by piety and virtue. Such a decision taken by a king who lived in an era where military might was the measure of power earned him a unique place in history. Ashoka was a true humanist. His policies were oriented towards the welfare of his people. His Dhamma was based on social responsibility. Besides giving importance to respecting Brahmins and servants, obedience to elders, abstention from killing living beings, Dhamma also asked people to live in religious harmony. It combined in itself the good points of all sects. Ashoka proved to be a tolerant monarch who, although himself a Buddhist, never sought to impose his personal religion on his subjects. In his 12th major rock edict, he states that in honoring of other sects lie the honor of one's own sect. As a king, Ashoka set a very high ideal for himself. He saw himself as a father and the subjects as his children. He communicated his thought and philosophy to his people by inscribing them on stone pillars and rock surfaces. These edicts are remarkable examples of Mauryan architecture and also of engineering skills. They are the living monuments of his times. Ashoka attempted to educate his subjects by pointing out the wastefulness of expensive rituals. He asked people to practice ahimsa. He himself gave up the practice of the royal hunt and pleasure tours and instead began the Dhamm Yatras, that is, tours for the furtherance of Dhamm. By giving his empire a common Dhamm, a common language and practically one script, that is Brahmi, he brought further political unification. India has been a secular country since the Buddhist age. Though he himself became a Buddhist, he did not impose it on the others, but followed a tolerant religious policy. He made gifts and grants to non-Buddhist as well as anti-Buddhist. Ashoka's fame also rests on the measures that he took up to spread the message of peace amongst the different regions of the world. He sent ambassadors to the Greek kingdoms and the West. Indian culture spread to faraway lands. According to a Buddhist tradition, Ashoka sent Buddhist missions to regions such as Sri Lanka and Central Asia. Buddhism spread to different parts of the world, and although it is no longer a major force in India today, yet it continues to be popular in Sri Lanka and the far eastern countries. The Varna system, popularly known as the caste system, which had arisen in the Vedic age, now became well established and gradually became the dominant form of social organization throughout India. Along with the new religions and philosophy, the growth of cities, crafts and trade furthered the process of cultural unity in our country. Ashoka unified the entire country under one empire and renounced the use of war as state policy. On the other hand, he says that he strives to discharge the debt he owes to all human creatures. The Mauryan contributed greatly to art and architecture also. This was very significant, and Ashoka is known to have built about 84,000 stupas to commemorate various events of Buddha's life. According to Megasthenes, Patliputra's grandeur marked that of the cities of Persia. Ashokan edicts were inscribed on stone pillars that were made of single columns of polished sandstone and had capitals on the top. The best preserved of all Ashokan edicts stands at Lauria Nandangarh in Bihar. This 32 feet tall column has an almost 50-ton seated lion capital placed on its top, an engineering feat worth admiring. The bull capital from Rampura is also another fine example of Mauryan sculpture. The most famous capital is the one at Sarnath, which shows 4 lions and the Dharma Chakra. You must be familiar with this, as this has been adopted as the national emblem of the Republic of India. Besides pillars, Mauryan figures have also come to light. The most well known of these is the Yakshani from Didarganj. The beauty of these figures lies in the exactness of their workmanship and in the fact that they appear to be made from one single stone. Like the pillars, these figures are polished with a unique surface gloss, now called Mauryan polish. As students, you will also be amazed to know that despite all these centuries, this gloss has not lost its shine. Besides the language that has been used in nearly all the inscriptions and Prakrit, which appears to have become the lingua franca of the country, and in the Brahmi script, the earliest known Indian script. Another noteworthy aspect of Mauryan architecture is the rock-cut caves. The Lomash Rishi, with his impressive entrance, and the Sudama caves are examples of such architecture. These caves, cut from solid rock, were provided by Ashoka for non-Buddhist monks. These caves mark the beginning of the rock-cut architecture, which was patronized by the later rulers also. His rock edicts were inscribed in the local language and the local script. Now we can also study about the post-Mauryan cultural developments. Although the Greeks, the Shakas, the Parthians, the Kushans were foreigners, they were slowly absorbed into the local population. Since they were warriors, the lawgivers assigned them the status of a Kshatriya. It should be noted that such a large-scale assimilation of foreigners into the Indian society took place only in the post-Mauryan times. We can say roughly from about 200 BC to about 3rd century AD. Profound changes took place in the economic and political life and vital developments in different aspects of cultural life of our country. That is, in religion, art, science, as well as technology. There was a significant advancement in foreign trade both by land and by sea, besides emergence of various crafts. Many foreign rulers adopted Vaishnavism. In the base Nagar pillar inscriptions, Heliodorus, the Greek ambassador of the Indo-Greek king Antalcidas, describes himself a Bhagwat, that is, worshipper of Vishnu. Similarly, some coins of Kanishka also show the figure of Shiva on them. You will recall that one of the Kushan rulers was called Vasudeva, clearly indicating his Vaishnava faith. Do you know the importance attached to the year of Kanishka's accession, that is 78 AD? Well, you will be surprised to know that it marks the beginning of the Shaka era. The interaction among different foreign ethnic groups and the Indians played an important role in the choice of one or the other Indian religions. Some foreign rulers also turned to Buddhism, as this did not create the problems of fitting into the caste system. Menander converted to Buddhism. Kanishka too is remembered for his services to this religion. However, this increasing popularity of Buddhism brought about a major change in the religion. Buddhism in its original form was too abstract for the foreigners. They therefore advocated a simpler form through which they could satisfy their religious cravings. Around the same time, Buddhism split into 2 schools, the Mahayana or the Great Wheel and the Hinayan or the Small Wheel. The former believed in image worship, rituals and bodhisattvas, that is, incarnations of Buddha, while the latter continued the practice of the earlier Buddhism. The Mahayana received royal patronage from Kanishka, who convened the 4th Buddhist assembly to finalize its teachings. He also set up many stupas in memory of the Buddha. Now, art and sculpture also played a very important role during this time. Central Asian invasions led to further development of Indian art and sculpture. Close contacts with the Western world introduced many new forms in Indian art. The most significant development was the growth of the Gandhar school of art. This school borrowed features from both the Greek and the Roman art forms. Many images of the Buddha from the Kushan period have Apollyon faces. The hair is in the Greco-Roman style and the draperies arranged in the style of a Roman toga. The assimilation of artistic features was probably because many artisans from different countries, trained in different schools, came together under the Kushan rule. Mathura, which was the center of the indigenous school of art, was also influenced by the invasions. A number of images from here of terracotta and red sandstone, which have definite Shaka Kushan influence, have survived. The most famous is the headless statue of Kanishka from Mathura. While the earlier Buddhists had used only symbols to depict the Buddha, the Mathura school became the first to make faces and figures of the Buddha. Folklores such as the Jatakas were drawn out in long panels on rock faces. Besides the images of Buddha, which were made in large numbers, statues of Mahavira were also produced. In the Deccan and in South India, the Satvahans held an important position under the Mauryas. After the death of Ashoka, they assumed total independence. They became very powerful and made their capital at Paithan or Pratishthan on the river Godavari. The Satvahans soon entered into conflict with the foreign satraps, especially the Shakas. It was under Gautamiputra and his son Vashishtaputra Satkani that the Satvahans became very powerful. They entered and extended their kingdom, cleared forests, made roads, and administered their state well. New towns came up and trade was carried on with far-off countries like Persia, Iraq, and Cambodia. The Kharvela king, which rose to a position of importance after the Mauryas, was Kalinga. Kalinga included modern Orissa and parts of northern Andhra. Its most important ruler was Kharvel. The Hathigumpa inscription in a Jain cave at Udaygiri Hills would give us a detailed account of his reign. But unfortunately, it is not easily decipherable. It is definitely known that he was a great administrator as well as a brave warrior. He carried out works of piety and public utility, like building roads and gardens. The area which lies to the south of the river Krishna and the Tungabhadra is called South India. It was the region of the Cholas, the Cheras, and the Pandyas, who were constantly at war with each other. The main source of information about these kingdoms and the life of the people is the Sangam literature. That is why the period from the beginning of the 1st century BC to the end of the 2nd century AD is called the Sangam period of the history of southern India. Karikal was the most important ruler of this kingdom. He defeated the combined forces of the Cheras and the Pandyas. He succeeded in pushing back an invasion from Ceylon. Karikal has been credited with many welfare activities. He got many canals dug so that water from the river Kaveri could be used for irrigation purposes. Karikal patronized works of literature and art. He was a follower of the Vedic religion. The Pandyan Empire was founded by a woman king. She maintained a huge army. She also encouraged trade and patronized art as well as literature. The people during this period lived a simple life. They were fond of music, dancing, and poetry. Many musical instruments like drums, flutes, pipes, etc. were popular. Most of the people lived in valleys and a majority of them were farmers. Others were herdsmen. They were artisans and craftsmen who also mainly lived in the towns. They were merchants, especially in the coastal areas, and trade was carried on by sea. The Greeks, the Kushans, the Shakas, and the Parthians were all called Yavanas. They soon merged with the Indian society and adopted Indian names and intermarried. Even their coins started carrying the images of Indian gods like Vishnu, Ganesha, and Mahesh. The fact that they had adopted the Indian society easily may explain why foreigners patronized Buddhism. The age of Harshvardhan, King Harshvardhan decided that he must subdue the petty warring rulers and bring them under his domain. He devoted 6 important years of his life to do so. Hyun Sang, a Chinese traveler, and Banabhat, his court poet, have given detailed account of Harsha's reign. According to Hyun Sang, King Harshvardhan had an efficient government. He further tells us that families were not registered and there was no forced labor. Do you know that Harsh built many hospitals and rest houses? He also gave grants to many religions, especially Buddhism and Hindu religion. Later in his life, Harsh became more inclined towards Buddhism. Harsha's literary activities had some important plays. Example, Nagananda Ratnavali and Priyadarsita. He collected learned men around him, as is evident from the report of Yun Sang and Ban Bhatt. Ban wrote Harsha's famous biography, Harsh Charita, as well as the literary piece Kadambari. You have already studied about the Satvans, who controlled the Deccan for a long time. After the decline of the Satvans, many small kingdoms came up in the Deccan. The first one among them was that of the Vakatakas, who tried to build a strong state, but they did not last long. After the Vakatakas came the Chalukyas of Vatapi and Kalyani. Pulakesin was a powerful ruler of the Chalukyan dynasty. The Chalukyas kept fighting with the Rashtrakutas towards the north and the Pallavas towards the south. The Chalukyan rule came to end in 753 AD when the Rashtrakutas defeated them. The capital city of Vatapi was a prosperous one. There was trade relations with Arabia, Iran and the Red Sea port to the west, as well as with South Asia. Pulakesin II sent an ambassador to King Khusro II of Persia. The Chalukyas patronized art as well as religion. They built temples and cave shrines in the Deccan hills. Many of the sculptures of the Ellora caves were created at the time under the patronage of the Chalukyas and the Rashtrakutas. Now let us see about the cultural development that took place during the Gupta period. The last phase of ancient Indian history starts in early 4th century AD and ends in about 8th century AD. The Guptas built a strong and powerful kingdom, and under the political unity and state patronage that was provided by them, cultural activities increased manifold. You will recall that following the Greek invasion, various art forms in India had been markedly influenced by Greco-Roman styles. This art mainly depicted the Buddha or Buddhist thought. But during the Gupta period, art became more creative and Hindu gods and goddesses also came to be portrayed. The artistic achievement of the age is exhibited in the delicate workmanship and the variety of designs shown in different kinds of Gupta coins. The general scheme that was followed was to exhibit the portrait of the king on one side of the coin or an appropriate goddess with her associated symbols on the other side. The king is shown in many positions: shooting a tiger or a lion, playing a musical instrument, seated on a high backed couch, etc. On the reverse in most cases was Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth, and in some cases Saraswati, the goddess of knowledge and arts. Besides coins, Gupta art found adequate expression in monuments and sculptures. The skilled artists of this age used their tools and skills to express the ideals and philosophical traditions of India through various art forms. They decorated even the niches and corners of religious places with statues of gods and goddesses. The images of gods were treated as symbols representing attributes associated with the gods. Hence, the gods were shown having 4 or 8 arms, in each arm carrying a symbol or an ayudha, that is a weapon, although they were depicted in human forms. Stone, terracotta and other materials were used to construct the abodes of gods and goddesses. Example of the Gupta art can be seen at the Dashavatara temple at Deoghar and the cave temples in Udaygiri hills. However, the most famous examples of Gupta art that still persist even today are the numerous seated and standing images of Buddha from Sarnath. The school of art that thrived at Sarnath provides us with some of the most pleasing and graceful images of the Buddha. Besides stone, Gupta artists were also skilled in bronze. A 2-meter high bronze image of Buddha has been discovered at Sultanganj near Bhagalpur in Bihar. Examples of sculptures and caves created during this period are traced to the famous Ellora caves. The Gupta architecture has survived in a few shrines, rock-cut caves, that is Ajanta, and temples such as the Dashavatara temple at Deoghar. These structures were mainly made of stone and bricks. Some references in the works of Kalidas give us a glimpse of the Gupta architecture. The poet has given a vivid picture of a well-planned town with network of roads, marketplaces, big sky-touching palaces and mansions with terraces. The palaces had many inner apartments. They had courtyards, prisons, courtroom and sabhagar. The veranda opened on roofs lit with moonbeam at night. The pleasure garden, which was attached to palace, contained all sorts of seasonal flowers and trees. Archaeological evidence about Gupta architecture is, however, poor. However, examples of Gupta shrines have been discovered in the jungles of central India, especially in the Bundelkhand region. These include the one at Bhitargaon in Kanpur district. Painting was an art form reached a very high level of perfection during the Gupta period. The wall frescoes at the Ajanta caves, that is in Aurangabad, and the ones at Bagh caves near Gwalior bear evidence of this. Although Ajanta paintings belong to the period between the 1st to the 7th century AD, yet most of these were produced during the Gupta times. These paintings depict various scenes from the life of the Buddha. The skill with which the human, animal and plant figures have been drawn shows the refined and sensitive nature of Gupta art. The conception of beauty was a characteristic of Gupta art. Expression through art was given importance as it was regarded as a means for the attainment of spiritual joy. Any account of ancient India is going to be incomplete without referring to the two dynasties of southern India, that is the Pallavas and the Cholas, and their contribution to art, architecture, administration and conquest. Quite a few dynasties rose in the south from the early centuries of the Christian era. Among them, the Pallavas were great patrons of art and architecture. The Rath at Mahabalipuram style of temples built by them were fine examples of rock-cut temples. The Pallavas also built structured temples like the Kailashnath and Vaikunt Perumal temples at Kanchipuram. The Kailashnath temple is a huge structure with thousands of images and is said to be the largest single work of art ever undertaken in India. There is also a set of bas reliefs found at Mahabalipuram, which is attributed to the Pallava period. The pagodas built at Mahabalipuram go back to the 1st century AD. Temple building activity flourished in India from the 5th century AD onwards, while the North Indian temples were built in the Naga styles consisted of the shikhars, that is spiral roofs, the Garbha Graha, that is a sanctum, and the Mandapam, that is a pillared hall. The temples in the south were built in the Dravida style, complete with Vimana or Shikhara, high walls and the gateway topped by Gopuram. After the Pallavas, that is from the 6th to the 8th century AD, the tradition of building temples was further developed by the Cholas in the south. Do you know that the temples were the central place in the village? It was the gathering place for the villagers who would come here every day and exchange ideas and discuss all matters of common interest. It served as a school too. During festival days, dances and dramas were also performed in the temple courtyard. The achievements of the Cholas also lie in their conquests across the seas and developing democratic institutions for governments at the village level. The village panchayat, called Sabha or Ur, had extensive powers. It had control over finances too. This body included several committees which looked after various aspects of village administration. A very detailed account of the functioning of the Sabha is available from one of the Chola scriptures. The Chola rulers were also great builders. The Dravida style of temple architecture reached its zenith under the Chola rulers. One of the finest examples of this style is the Raja Rajeshwar or Brihadeshwara temple. During this period, one also notices great achievements in the field of sculpture. Great progress was made in literature also, both religious as well as secular. Sanskrit also became the language of the courts in many parts of the country. Tamil literature also made great progress. The Alvas and the Nayanas, the Vaishnavite and the Shaivite saints made lasting contributions to it. In spite of the dominating position of Sanskrit in most parts of the country, this period marks the beginning of many Indian languages as well as distinct scripts in different parts of the country. In short, we can say that by the time the ancient period of India's history comes to an end, India has developed a culture which was marked by features that had characterized it ever since. The transformation of the ancient Brahmanical faith into modern Hinduism can be regarded as the most distinguishing feature from the Gupta period onwards. Buddhism no longer received as much royal patronage as it did earlier. Brahmanism had come to the forefront. The Gupta rulers specially provided filling to the Bhagavad sect of Hinduism. They called themselves Bhagavatas, worshipped Lord Vishnu, performed the Ashwamedha Yagya, gave large donations to Brahmins and built many temples. The Purans were finally compiled in this age. Vishnu emerged as the god of devotion and came to be represented as the preserver of Dharma. Numerous legends gathered around him, and a whole Puran called Vishnu Puran was compiled in his honor. Similarly, a law book called the Vishnu Smriti was also named after him. Above all, by the 4th century AD, there came into being a famous Vaishnav work called Srimad Bhagavat Puran, which taught devotion to Lord Krishna. A few Gupta kings also were worshippers of Shiva, the god of destruction. Bhagavatism, which was a contemporary to Buddhism and Jainism in origin, and owed its birth to the stream of thoughts which began with Upanishads, reached its zenith and became the most popular sect during this age. The theory of 10 avatars or the Dash avatars of the supreme god Vishnu came to be accepted amongst them. Krishna was considered the most important. Besides Vishnu, Brahma, Surya, Kartikeya, Ganesha, Durga, Lakshmi, Saraswati and others were also worshipped, as were lesser gods like Indra, Varuna, Yama, etc. The snakes, the yakshas and the gandharvas also continue to be revered. Even animals, plants, rivers and mountains were looked upon with reverence, and cities like Banaras and Prayag became places of pilgrimage. Idol worship became popular. Thus, the prominent features of modern Hinduism had taken its shape during the Gupta period. Although Buddhism was on its decline, yet it continued to have a great following. Besides the artistic creations of Ajanta and Ellora, the images of Sarnath, Buddha belonging to the time, show that Buddhism was also quite popular. Even Jainism commanded some following during the Gupta period. Nalanda now emerged as a center of learning during this period. It had become a great center of learning during Harsha's reign. Students from different parts of the world came here to imbibe learning. Although all the remains of Nalanda have not yet been excavated, yet the evidence of a huge complex of buildings has been uncovered. Some of these were as many as 4-story high. According to Yun Sang, Nalanda housed as many as 10,000 students. It was supported by the revenue of 200 villages. Although this huge monastic educational establishment was primarily a center for learning of Mahayana Buddhism, yet the curriculum included secular subjects as well. Grammar, logic, epistemology and sciences were taught here. Students were encouraged to develop a spirit of inquiry and reasoning. Active discussions and debates were taking place. Harsha is said to have invited 1,000 learned monks of Nalanda to take part in the philosophical assembly at Kannauj. In his account, Yun Sang has given a detailed account of Nalanda. This university continued to be the center of intellectual activity till the 12th century. According to tradition, Christianity was brought to India by St. Thomas in the 1st century AD. According to legends, the Parthian king Gondophanes sent a messenger to Syria to look for a skillful architect who would build for him a new city. This messenger returned with St. Thomas, who converted him and many members of his court to Christianity. It was most probably the frequent trade and movement between India and the West which was responsible for bringing this disciple of Lord Christ to India. The merchants, traders and even craftsmen frequently traveled along popular land and sea routes. St. Thomas preached Christianity in many parts of India. He was killed at Mylapore near Madras. The tomb of St. Thomas is still to be found at the same place. A large community of Christians, known as Syrian Christians, continue to reside in Kerala even today. The Christian Church has two major divisions, the Roman Catholic Church and the Protestant Church. The holy book of the Christians is the Bible. The Bible contains two parts, the Old Testament and the New Testament. The Bible today is available in all major languages spoken in our country. Today, we have over 1.5 crore Christians in India. Several charitable institutions under their patronage are flourishing in all parts of our country. Perhaps the most famous Christian social worker, he has contributed a great deal for the welfare of the poor and homeless in our country. Thank you.